but we had a special guest that wanted to jump in and have this conversation, and I know Mike.
Is it Sam Harris?
It might be on a time constraint, so I just want to make sure we're respectful. And since Ben's part of the team, Ben, we can come back around and
okay.
dive back into this. But I definitely want to bring on the man.
Thank you for talking with me, Mark.
Back to you, man.
Yep, and we'll get you back on, Ben.
Okay.
But Mr. TJump is in the building, and so I let Tom know a little bit of what was going on as far as the belief system and everything, and you guys can have a little chat and get to know kind of the premise, Mark, on your belief system. But second coming of Christ, eighth incarnation of Buddha, and the rest goes on. I'll let you go down the list, but he said he was interested in jumping on, having that conversation. But so I will, I'll shut up and let you guys chop it up.
Hey, how's it going? Can you guys hear me?
How you doing, man?
Pretty good. So is there anything other than matter and energy in the universe?
Well, so there's space, right, which matter exists, and matter and energy exist inside of.
Space is a kind of matter and energy. Space-time is a kind. So do you think there's anything other than just physical stuff, matter, energy, and motion, space-time?
Well, it depends on how you're interpreting that. For instance, the human being's five senses only can see 0.2% of the universe. And so there's like 99.8% of the universe we can't even perceive. And then our
matter and energy. So is there anything other than matter and energy?
Well, for instance, scientists are hypothesizing that antimatter exists.
Also a kind of matter.
Huh?
That's also a kind of matter. But
it's also distinctly different. So, well, let's slow down the conversation.
No, matter is just the stuff that exists as a part of energy, as a fraction of energy. So antimatter and matter are both forms of energy. So I'm asking.
Hang on one second. So short answer is, I don't know how all functions of the universe are. I don't know all the things that are in the universe. I only know what I've been told by physicists.
Right. I'm not asking you to know everything. I'm just asking what your position is. Is your position that there is anything other than just matter and energy as described in physics?
I think there's probably other stuff we haven't discovered yet.
But it's not like your position that God is this other stuff. It's just...
I don't see a distinction between matter and energy and God.
Okay, so you're not asserting that anything exists beyond physics. You're just saying you accept physics and you just call that God.
No, I mean, there's more to it than just physics. There's a lot of different ways to analyze it.
All right, so I understand everything in the universe to be describable by physics, just matter and energy and motion. So that is everything. And so if everything is God, then that would be God.
Well, for instance, there's Newtonian physics. And before, and at the time that Newton was discovering Newtonian physics and building it out, and we were building our worldview based on that, we didn't have relative physics, which flipped the world on its head. And then, as we got weirder with that, there wasn't quantum physics, and that came, and that flipped everything on its head. Knowledge is constantly transforming and growing. We can never say definitively what the universe is and all characteristics and qualities and aspects as far as matter, energy, and all those things. Right, we know of, for instance, we know of 4 fundamental forces, and then we know of 17 subatomic particles, but there's also, they're theorizing there's an 18th one. So we don't know everything that's in the universe.
Right. I never said we knew everything, so I don't know why you're bringing that up. So my question is, do you think there's anything, do you have any evidence or any position that is asserting there is more than what we know via science?
When you say more what we know, I feel like you have to be a little more precise with what you're asking me. Are you asking me about God or asking me about what physicists may discover in the future?
No, I'm asking you, do you believe in anything that is outside of what is supported by science? Like UFOs, ghosts, anything outside of what is supported by science.
Like I said, I have to think about it. I'm pretty agnostic unless we've been able to nail it down.
That's fair enough. So when you're talking about God, you're only talking about, as far as we know of, just the stuff supported by science. You're just calling that God, plus whatever else happens to be out there.
Well, not just supported by science in the modern interpretation, like alchemy, for instance, the alchemical God. Would it be something we're supporting that science supports? Because one, it hasn't really dived into it, and two, maybe a lot of it's not translatable to science, and that seems to be a lot of the issue when we have these conversations on here. Is a lot of what I believe with this alchemical God doesn't seem translatable in the framework of this atheist empirical method
Can you give
of
me an example?
discovering and understanding.
Can you give me an example?
The 3-hour podcast we had last week.
That does not help me at all.
Well, for instance, these questions we're asking now don't make sense to me because I already told you that I believe God is the culmination of all things in reality. Like reality itself and God are intrinsically intertwined. There's no separation or distinction. So
Okay.
It doesn't exist outside of the realm of reality, but because science isn't complete and never will be, there are things about God that exist outside of what we discovered in science because science is incomplete. The very conceptual understanding of God is that God is the complete all things that exist in reality.
I'm just trying to understand what you mean by God. So if you just mean by God all the stuff that exists that we know about through science, and you don't mean a non-physical mind that can cause things, then all you're doing is labeling the reality, the stuff we can discover, as God, and that's fine. There's not a problem.
Yeah, but I just told you that I didn't think God was just what we discovered in science. I think it's all things we've ever discovered in science.
Right. I agree with you.
Plus a bunch of things we haven't figured out yet.
That's fine by me. So if you're just limited to only accept the stuff that is discovered by science, and you're not positing something else and saying there is this other thing here that we know about, or that you know about, that science doesn't know about, then that's fine. You're just calling all this stuff we've discovered God, and that's okay.
Well, but it goes a bit deeper too, because when we understand this extra addition, and this is what we talked about last time, we put this extra layer of God inside of all these things, and talk about the consciousness of God. You see, God is conscious because we are conscious, and it's not trivial. It's not trivial. Like, well, that's the same thing as everything in science. Like, that's fine if that's what you guys want to call it, but I think it's also transcendent. I think it's also psychological, and to believe in God and to put yourself to the highest order and look up and humble yourself to something greater than yourself, and to have awe and reverence and gratitude for all that exists is actually important. It's not trivial. And to just look at the universe as something that is mute, something that doesn't speak to us, something that we're not interrelatedly and interconnected to. There's this thing amongst, this idea of the secular view or the atheistic view that we are separate from all that is in nature, right? Like we are examining nature almost externally from this point, this external perspective, when we ourselves are nature and interconnected and related to that. And I think part of what this belief in God is it does that for us. But there's that other philosophical layer too that's important, and that is to humble ourselves to this greater good, this greater idea. So there's these other layers that are important, but they're not important in the scientific, like when we take science, like biology, physics. It's important in a philosophical and psychological way. Like those things are important. God is so many more things than just the measurable, perceivable universe, which can go into a microscope or be looked through in a telescope.
So the only difference between your worldview and science is that you like to worship nature. Is that right?
Well, not my only thing. I think
What else is there?
There's a lot of things. I don't know. What are you trying to get at?
Well, it seems like you're just an everyday atheist, except you worship nature. That there's no difference between you and anybody else on the show.
Well, no, because I'm not obsessing over whether or not God exists.
I don't think anyone on the show does either. We obsess over arguments and debates and stuff. So, but what would be your other differences between science and your position?
I don't know. I mean, I said I did it for 3 hours. I had this conversation. Were you there or no?
No, I was not there.
So, like, ask me a specific question. Like, you're asking these very broad questions. Like, just talk to me like you're trying to have a conversation with me.
That is
like we're just going back and forth and we're having fun talking about our beliefs.
That is
the way. Let me explain to you. The way you're asking the questions is like very like I'm sitting inside of an interrogation room, man. Like, just talk to me. Just take a deep breath and just like ask me questions. Because right now it just feels like you're just trying to nail me to a cross, ironically enough. So just like what made me come to this? What kind of feelings do I have about it? Like, describe. Like I told you, God is everything. God is everything to me. It's human beings. It's the cup. It's all these different things. So I don't know what I feel like I've answered that. Like, I feel like I've answered it 100 times. I believe God is all things that exist in the universe. And some of those things exist outside of the realm of science because science hasn't discovered all things in the universe yet.
Okay, so again, I'm just trying to understand what you mean by the word, or else I can't ask you any questions about what you believe or why you believe it until I understand what it is that you believe. So what is the difference between your position and just an average atheist, other than the fact that you like to worship nature?
Well, it depends on the atheist, because some atheists refute an Abrahamic God, but they consider the possibility of a pantheistic one, right? Some atheists just completely outright refuse the word. It's not like there's one kind of atheist either. Like, that's obvious. We have a lot of people on the show who have differing views. So, like, you've got to ask like a more direct question.
No, it's really direct. Just give me a single example, a single fact or proposition that you accept that an atheist would not accept.
Well, that I think that, for instance, there's more that we can do with our brains when we take the position that there is a God and that we can rise to a higher like understanding of our own brain and our own body, that we can actually affect material universe with our thoughts. That's
what do you mean by that? Like use the force and lift stuff kind of affect the universe?
Like when we meditate, we can up and down regulate our DNA and actually repair our telomeres.
Okay, that's an interesting one.
And reduce inflammation in our DNA because we start to connect with this more divine connection with the universe. And before you argue with me, go ahead and look it up. It's good research. You can meditate away inflammation.
That's fantastic. What exactly do you mean by inflammation of DNA?
No, inflammation in the body. So when you meditate, you can actually up and down, right? So the way the double helix works.
I know what meditation does. I know how it affects stress. I know how it reduces cortisol and increases serotonin, which can increase the metabolism and your immune system. So I know how it works. I know how meditation can affect your body. It can't do anything with your DNA though. That it cannot do.
No, it can. It turns up and on and off codons. The DNA operates like a bunch of 0-1 switches. And when you meditate, you can do what's called up and down. You regulate gene codons on the DNA. There's changes occurring there.
Okay, so DNA is not like switches. It doesn't switch anything.
Hold on, I'm gonna look it up.
It's a code. So it's just there's ATCG. Those are
Give me a second,
languages. Bro. It doesn't switch anything, and it creates proteins. Proteins read it and then produce more proteins. So meditation does not affect DNA.
Hang on 1 second, bud.
Go for it.
Yeah, and so these different chemical like catalysts essentially change the way the DNA expresses itself in your body. Change
the way the DNA expresses. How exactly does it do that?
I don't know exactly. I'm not a chemist. I'm telling you about research. You asked me things that I believe that are outside the realm of science, and now you're asking me for science to prove it.
Oh no, that was a great answer. That you did answer my question. I asked, what do you disagree with science? And that
no, not disagree. You asked me, is there anything that I believe that science doesn't believe or hasn't gotten to yet? And then I told you something, and then you told me, well, science doesn't prove that. Exactly. Right. So you just asked me.
Right. So you answered my question perfectly.
You're putting me into a circular argument. I can't.
No.
I have to be wrong on.
No.
Literally, just hang on. You literally just hang on. You literally just asked me to tell you something that science doesn't support, and then asked me to use science to support it.
No, that's not what I
did. You did.
So you did answer my first question exactly how I wanted you to. I asked you, what is the difference between your position in science and meditation can affect DNA? You're right. That is a complete difference. Thank you for answering my question. Now I'm going to go to a different question, which is totally unrelated. Why do you think meditation can affect DNA?
Because I think our minds are actually input-output devices, and the earth is more like a realm that can change based on our thoughts, which is also not provable with science. I think that we actually can change the material universe at the quantum level with our brains. We just forgot how to do it. And that calling ourselves God and understanding God exists in the universe will unlock a power that will explain how Moses parted the Red Sea. And I know we get off on a really weird, I can't prove that with science, but I believe that I am trying to pioneer the way the mind works in our reality, the same way that guy that ran the 4-minute mile was trying to pioneer the ability for people to run faster. I'm trying to get people to think better or think bigger. And I think there's way more to this reality that we don't understand, and that we can actually manipulate reality. And Jesus actually turned water to wine. And of course, I can't prove any of those things.
Okay, so my question is, since it can't be proven by science, you must have used some other method to come to this belief. How did you come to the belief that this is a true thing if you didn't use science?
So who was that guy that looked out at the universe, and before we realized that stars were just stars were suns like ours, he looked out and he's like, my God, those things are suns. I don't know what his name was, but there was a person that discovered that. And then, he eventually died carrying that belief and trying to tell people about it. The answer to my question or your question you asked me, is the same as him. He didn't use science because it was beyond the science that was currently there. He had a gut feeling. He had probably related different scientists together and drawn a new conclusion. And that's how we use the scientific method to understand new things. I use different texts. I put them together and say, you know what? This might be the next step. And then I try to jump into unknown area and see if we can test it. This is the way anything gets discovered, is by the person sticking their neck out and saying, I believe something kind of strange and crazy. How do we test this?
Yes, that's called a hypothesis. Every scientist starts by using their imagination to come up with an idea, and it's completely unsupported by anything other than their imagination, and then they try to make testable predictions to demonstrate it.
Yeah. So
the reason you came to this is just because you imagine it. Is that what you're saying? It's a hypothesis, but you don't have any support for it yet?
Came to what? That the one I just said about the mind creating reality?
Editing the DNA stuff?
Well, the DNA stuff is because there's a lot of information that you can meditate, like I said, meditate and change the way your genes express themselves in your body, right? And so from there, I'm like, well, and I also did some other reading where it's like every experience that happens to you in your life gets written on your DNA, right? Like in one way, shape, or form, your DNA takes on the experiences you have throughout your life. That's, for instance, they say how alcoholism runs through the family, how it becomes a hereditary disease is someone's experience with alcoholism in their own life builds patterns in the DNA, which is the thing that passes on to the child. And now they're more susceptible to alcoholism, right? So
no, that's not quite how it works.
But I'm playing with those ideas because they're starting to make sense, because I draw from a couple different places. And I say, what if the generational curses from the Bible were just actually talking about genes and DNA being affected during your lifetime based on the actions and behaviors you make, and then it getting passed down to your children? What if those two things are the same thing, for instance, right? This is the kind of stuff that I'm doing.
Okay, so the science I know of says that essentially nothing you do affects your DNA unless it causes a mutation or is a kind of radiation. Your actions don't affect your DNA at all. Your brain states don't affect your DNA. The science says that does not happen. So I don't know what you mean when you say that there is evidence of this occurring, because it's not in science. So,
what you're saying is you have read all of the literature on DNA and how it works.
I have read the consensus on the field who have read all the literature and know how DNA works.
So you've talked about everything, and you already asked all these exact questions that you're asking me now. You are completely confident you know everything about how DNA works currently in all the literature and science, is what you're telling me right now.
I know the consensus of how DNA works, so I know how the experts in the field see it.
Describe consensus to me.
The vast majority of the people who've done all of the work in the field.
No, describe the consensus that they came to.
Oh, the consensus that, brain states and actions do not affect DNA in any way.
Could you cite some research for me real quick?
Sure, I could. Does meditation affect DNA? Meditation does not impact the results of DNA tests. Nope.
So you looked at one search on Google, and now that's your answer? No. Like, you're not going to dig into it. You're not going to use JSTOR. You're not going to use like a bunch. You're not going to take some time with this. You're just going to jump to that conclusion. That's not how science works, man.
Yeah, I'm just reading the science. These are all scientific journals I'm reading from. I just went to the Google Scholar.
Like, how many did you just read?
I'm just reading the titles of them.
Okay, well, that doesn't
I don't
really tell
actually
you
need
much
to
about
read
anything, does it?
any of them because
You don't
know
actually
what
read
they're
any
saying.
research on DNA, but you're telling me you know all
No,
about it.
I've already read the research on DNA. I know what the consensus result is, and the consensus result is that you're wrong. So, I mean, if you want to prove me wrong on that, go for it. I mean, I'm happy to take the burden of proof, and if you can show that there's actually,
Well, I think
I'm
it's a
wrong
waste of
about the
time to
consensus,
try to like
feel free.
research a bunch right now, but I'd love to go
That's
back on
fine.
and find some stuff on it. Like at the
That's
end of the
cool.
day, okay, I'm not embarrassed about admitting that I'm wrong right now. I read something that said when you meditate, it can change the way your DNA expresses itself.
That's
I'll
fair.
go look for that article again. It's not a huge deal though if I'm wrong or if I'm right.
That's fair.
This started as a conversation where you asked me if I believed anything about God that existed outside of the scientific literature. And now you're using scientific literature to try to tell me I'm wrong.
Well, you said you read something, and so
And
I was
I
interested.
did. And I did read something, and I'll be glad to go look for it. But I think it's a terrible
That's
time
fine.
to do this right now.
That's
I
fine.
think we can be having a way better conversation right now. What
That's fine.
what is your goal right now?
Well, I was
Like,
looking for a reason to accept what you're saying is true or not, because I
no,
think it's
you
not
weren't.
true.
You were looking for a way to prove. If you were looking for a reason, you'd be talking to me like Pasta Mike. You'd be asking you'd be asking like detailed questions. They would be articulated well. You wouldn't be fast like shooting fast firing questions at me. You'd just be having a conversation with me. You're holding a position on the other side.
Questions.
All right.
So yeah, the way I assess the truth or falsity of any belief from anyone, including myself, is I try to destroy it as much as possible. And if I can't, then that's good evidence it's true. So that's how science works. How science works is you take an idea from every scientist, and every other scientist tries to beat the crap out of it to show it's false. And if they can't, then they have to admit the other scientist was right. So
yeah, but what is it that you're beating the crap out of? I already told you. I think God and this cup and me and you are the same thing.
The idea that meditation can affect our DNA, that idea I'm going to beat the crap out of because I think it's not true.
All right. Well, and I'm going to go look at the article I read that said it. But beyond that, well, I mean, how long are we going to beat the dead horse? I could be wrong.
No, that's fine.
I'm admitting right now. I'll even say I'm wrong. I don't know.
That's perfectly reasonable. That's perfectly reasonable response. Say you're gonna here's the resource I use to come to that conclusion, and you can look at it later. That's perfectly fine. Just send me that later. That's fine. I'm okay with that.
Okay.
So is there any other beliefs you have that would not agree with science or any normal atheist?
Why don't you just ask me a specific question?
How is that not a specific question?
Is there any beliefs? Ask me something specific, like a historical question, or the intent of God, why it's important to believe.
Intent. God has an intent.
Specific question.
What do you mean by God has an intent?
No, I'm giving you a sample question you could ask.
Well, I don't see any difference between your view and naturalism other than that one thing you listed. So anything I'd ask you would just be the same thing I'd ask anyone else on the show, and which is, I mean, I pretty much agree with you on everything, so I have nothing to ask you. So my questions of where there's a difference is because that's where the interesting questions would be, is if there's a
and I told you
between...
it's the psychological and philosophical layers of God. We went over this in the podcast last time. We all agreed that I'm basically a naturalist who believes that there's psychological and philosophical advantages to entering a divine spark or God into the rest of your naturalistic worldview. That's the only difference. That's what we agreed with last time. I don't disagree with that.
So why do you think that believing in the divine spark gives you some kind of more cognitive abilities?
Well, because then we place ourselves in the position of being a creator and being more than just human beings. Like we set the bar higher for ourselves as individual conscious beings in the universe, instead of just seeing the universe as something mute that doesn't communicate back with us. We don't understand the full extent of consciousness, but if we don't explore the ideas and possibly even accept the ideas that there's a grander consciousness that makes up this whole thing, we'll never be able to explore the possibilities of any advantages of that position. And I feel like there's a lot more advantages to believing in God than there is not believing it. That extra layer it's so dense and complex. And honestly, if you just like explore my belief system, there's a lot of cool things we can talk about on this. Right,
you give me an example, because you say there's other things that this belief adds. Like,
well, I just gave you one.
What?
This idea of exploring a greater consciousness in the universe and actually thinking about that and connecting with that idea can open up all these new doorways. Like maybe
give me one of the doorways. That's what I'm looking for. What is one of the doorways that it can open up?
Well, have you heard of lucid dreaming and astral projection?
Yes, I believe in lucid dreaming for sure, not astral projection, and I do that without a God. So
what I mean is, with astral projection and this idea of being able to connect with a deeper consciousness in the universe, well, that would require a belief in God, right?
No.
A consciousness, a greater consciousness. For
No.
me, it's my God that is that greater consciousness. So it's that belief in God that there's some deeper consciousness that I can communicate with, right? That allows me
that could be your belief,
consider
but
these ideas of astral projection and being able to actually take information from the universe and download it into myself through that practice and behavior. So that requires, for me, it requires a spiritual belief.
so it requires that for you, but it doesn't require it for many people. Like many people believe in astral projection and no God or no greater consciousness. It's just a feature of the universe. So you're not required to believe in a God to have that. So it doesn't seem like that's a new door. That
If I go into a projection and believe that I'm speaking to God, it does.
What's the difference?
That there's a larger consciousness. At the end of the day, we talked about this for 3 hours before. I'm using a different word for the same thing, but this idea.
No. You keep saying that there's this new ability we unlock by believing there is a God, and you said the new ability is we can think about astral projection.
No, you asked me to give you one example of a bunch. Like I could go on more. Like
one is good. Just stick with one at a time. So we can believe in astral projection without God. So that doesn't seem to be it. But you're saying you have an astral projection.
No. Like I'm talking about like actually connecting with the God that I believe in, which is the greater consciousness of all universe. I believe that's God. So when I astral project and I connect with that, I believe that I'm speaking to my God. That's my belief. So it's intrinsically tied to my belief in God.
So you have to believe in a God to believe that you can astral project and talk to a God. Like, okay, but what difference does that make? Like, what is the added ability we have in the world that gives us?
Well, there's another thing that it gives us is like when we believe in God, this idea of a higher power, that it's worth something. It gives us a motivation to be righteous. It gives us a motivation to look up and connect with something deeper than ourselves. It lets us look out at nature and be in awe and reverence for something that was created with intent.
And why do
To me, there's a lot of philosophical and psychological value with connecting with something bigger than yourself.
Okay, but why do you think you can't do that without a God? Because as far as I know, lots of people do that without a God.
Something bigger than themselves,
Absolutely.
like what? Like the universe itself?
Like the universe, like nature,
Yeah,
like the ether, like all kinds of things.
Call it universe, and I can call it God.
Okay. So, but you said you had to believe in a God. Like atheists do this without a God. So they can connect with the universe and believe there's a universe, connect with deeper things.
Like me and Sam Harris are basically the same. I just call it God. I mean, that's another thing is I don't get why people get so like tied up about it. It's just a word.
Well, you said there's some difference between belief in a God.
There's I think philosophical and psychological layers to it. That if there is deity, if there's purpose, and there's a reason to do good in the world, I can do all the things atheists do for that. Plus, I have another layer on top of that. Remember, this is an interpretation of words. So you can call it the universe, and I'll call it God.
I'm fine. I don't care which words you use. I want to know what the difference is. You say there's a difference between you and atheists, and I want to know what the difference is because all the things you listed, atheists believe in and do just fine without any reference to a God.
Well, there isn't much differences, and like I said, for 3 hours we kind of really came to that conclusion. It's like this 1% where I call it God, and I think that calling it God has purpose because it adds this layer of like reverence and beauty for me.
Maybe why can't you have reference?
I didn't say you couldn't. I didn't say you couldn't.
Okay.
I never said you couldn't.
Okay.
I never said anybody couldn't. I'm using the word God, and that's the word I like to use.
Well, I thought you said it added a deeper level of meaning.
It does for me.
For you.
The pursuit of God is a personal experience. I'm not trying to shove this down anybody's throat either. This is what I feel, what I believe. I call it God. You can call it the universe, or and Murder Shed Steve can call it Shabuba. Like I'm not sitting here saying that it's so like we have so many differences. Last episode I said we're like 99% agreeing on the same thing. I just use a different word, and I think that there's some philosophical and psychological value to seeing God as this intrinsic thing that's in all of us and seeing the divine in the next person. I think it's incredibly important. When I look at someone, I don't just see a human being. I see God itself. I see all of creation. I see the creator. I see intent to manifest beauty in the universe. Those things are important to me. And the word God helps me articulate that and feel that energy.
Okay, I'm fine with all of that. You can feel whatever you want to feel, but you're not saying there is any difference between like this new added ability, or there's no deeper meaning that you can't gain without a god. There's nothing that you need to call it a god to do.
What?
Like you kept saying that there's a difference in that it unlocks new abilities for calling it a god rather than just not
Yeah,
believing.
I outlined those things. I think that we can do way more with our brains, or actual brains, and I think we can disrupt and manipulate matter and energy with our minds when we jump into this position of not just being human, being able to transcend that with what I call the power of God.
Yeah, that would be really cool if you could demonstrate that. I would definitely consider that to be.
Yeah, I'm working on it.
Sure. So, but my question was, okay, other than that, because we already went over that, is there anything else that calling it God gets you that you can't get without calling it God?
Like, are you trying to convert me? Right? I don't know.
No, I don't care what you believe. It doesn't make a difference to me what you believe. I'm trying to understand.
Like I said,
what you think the
before on the
difference
last podcast, 99% of the stuff we agree on. I just basically told you.
Yeah, no. I want to know about the 1%. Is the 1% only
I just
the
told
difference
you
in
like
words?
10 things. That's not enough for you to fill the 1%.
10 things. I know 2 things. One is that you use the word God, and 2 is that you think you can manipulate matter with thoughts.
And I think that there's a philosophical value to it that gives me reverence and awe and excitement. And I see God in somebody else, and I see what's a divine spark, that there's an intent for consciousness, and that we're going somewhere with this, and it's important. Like that.
Okay, but is that just for you and your feelings, or would that apply to other people, or are they better off?
It depends on if it works for them. I don't know.
Okay.
It depends on the person. I mean, there's a lot of people that it does work for. There's a few people on my TikTok that enjoy it and that like that idea and like to empower themselves as a little G God in a big G world. It's just a layer. Like, I don't know. Like what I don't understand what it is you want to understand, or what are you getting at?
Again, I'm just trying to understand what exactly you mean by these terms. So if you're only doing it because it makes you feel better, that's fine by me. I don't have any problem with that. The only thing in your worldview that I seem to not agree with would be the fact that you think thoughts can affect matter. I still don't know what you mean by the philosophical and purposeful meaning in using the word. I mean, that seems like you can get that from anything depending on the person you are. It doesn't seem like.
Well, it depends on how you build the word out. It depends on how you build the concept out. I'm just using the word.
Well, that
God.
seems to be subjective. It seems to be that depending on the type of person you are.
It is subjective, because you can call it Allah, you can call it universe, you can call it Shabbat, you call it anything you want. It's a complex concept idea for me, where I've hyperlinked all the things that are important to me to this word.
Right. So that it wouldn't actually be a difference.
Huh?
That wouldn't be a difference. That would just be like you use this word and they use this word to get the same emotional response.
And we, like I said, for 3 hours we all agreed on that already. I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm the one. It was Murder Shed Steve and me who pioneered that and said, yeah, exactly. Snapped their fingers, pointed at each other. There's no disagreement there.
Okay, cool. So yeah, it seems like the only thing I disagree with your worldview on is that your mind can affect matter.
Yeah, that's the one I'm working on.
Cool.
I'm pioneering a science.
I look forward to seeing it published.
Hey, welcome. Well, first, Mark, as always, thanks, man, and great dialogue. And Mark always comes on, has a great attitude, and always willing to have a great conversation. We appreciate that. So again, Mark, thank you so much for being part of the roundtable again this evening. And TJump, the first time on the Atheist roundtable and showing up. Thank you, man. Appreciate it, and we all appreciate what you do for the community and what you bring with your channel and the debates and everything. So you are much valued here, brother. Thanks for coming on. Anything you want to say?
Was that different from your channel's usual content?
Depends on what you mean. Like he's not Darth Dawkins, so that's improvement.
Point.
Yeah.
Solid point.
So yeah, thanks for inviting me on, guys. It was a lot of fun. I'm gonna get some dinner. I'll talk to you later.
Yeah, man. Have a good one. Rest up.
Thanks, Jump. Appreciate it. And for those who don't know who TJump is, go check him out. He's got a platform here and on YouTube, and he's battled, as he just said, the infamous Darth Dawkins, which is an endless battle on YouTube. But he's a good dude, and love hearing him.
Sit down, sir. I'm not talking about certainty, okay?
Sir, don't overtalk me. They have a ton of fun, but we put it out there for questions to come in here and get the Q&A going for Mark. If you got questions for Mark or for Jesus Mike or myself, definitely let us know. We're going to kick in and have some fun. And thank you, everybody, so far that's been in the comment section. There's been tons of comments, tons of conversations going on.
Can I interject, by the way? There's someone in the comment sections that made a prophecy. Like it was Thales of Miletus. I'm sorry if I'm messing your name up. He literally at the beginning of the show goes, "Tart, you guys should get TJump on the show." And then he popped in. I was like, "What?" And then I just see him now pop through the thing, and I'm just like, "Hold on, I'm gonna need a backstory here." But anyway, we'll get into that after the show. But yeah, that was cool. That was a surprise to me and other people. So I don't know what Austin.
It was a surprise to me too.
Yeah, so, I mean, me as well. So
me too.
Tough questions. They were really tough questions, and you put me on the line. And I guess, but I still think that it brings me this layer of like searching for something more amazing and majestic in the universe. I guess, I don't know. It just seems like a nice psychological, philosophical layer to help me like understand the world in a deeper way. And it pushes me to demand more of myself than just what we expect is humanly possible, so to speak.
Sure. Yeah, I think the dilemma there a lot was hung up on maybe some linguistics and some words, and then where I share value in the same sense is kind of where you're deriving those, what future predictions can you do? But that, me and you, Mark, me and you could talk about that forever.
That was about to say there will be further episodes. We can continue that dialogue. But that being said, here is the man, Murder Shed Steve.
So it's time for Q&A with Murder Shed Steve.
Wait. Can you provide evidence that a God exists? Well, how's it going, guys?